Hi, everybody. I have to say right at the top, I am amazed that Blue Moon ever saw the light of day, as it were. I mean, talk about a cult film. I imagine that most of the people in our group have seen it by now. But if you went to a movie theater to see it, boy, you sure had to move fast. In Cleveland, it came and went in 2 weeks. So I assume you streamed it. And the good news is that by now you can purchase a DVD, which I did. I was the first on my block. But yes, a cult film, oh my goodness sake. And I would add a labor of love on the part of actor Ethan Hawke, director Richard Linklater, and screenwriter Robert Kaplow. Kaplow began working on this film a dozen years ago. But to call Blue Moon a biopic of lyricist Lorenz Hart would be a big mistake compared with the movies in the 1940s and 50s that were made about songwriters including Jerome Kern, George Gershwin, Cole Porter, and yes, Rodgers and Hart. That biopic is titled Words and Music, starring Mickey Rooney and Tom Drake. But if you've never seen it, keep it that way. These films are all loaded with egregious inaccuracies surrounded by musical numbers of variable quality. Blue Moon has not a single song in it. Instead, it's very witty because Hart was witty. And it's also very sad because that was Hart too. Welcome to the opening night of Oklahoma on March 31, 1943, when in one fell swoop, the Rodgers and Hart team of 25 years gave way to the Rodgers and Hammerstein team that immediately became the talk of the town. The entire film takes place in one room at Sardi's at the opening night party for Oklahoma, and it unfolds in real time, which for me makes it mesmerizing. I don't want our discussion to get fixated on what's true and untrue about Robert Kaplow's screenplay. That's really not what Blue Moon is about. Instead, it's the portrait of an artist clinging to his life in the face of alcoholism and depression, and I would even add lifelong trauma. That portrait is what I hope we'll talk about. And Ethan Hawke received a surprise Oscar nomination, as well he should have, for a film that mostly attracted the mavens like us. But I do want to identify a few details that are notable in one way or another. And first, I want to offer a few words about Rodgers and Hart, who wrote together from 1919 to 1943, when the lyricist died at just 48. It was a tragically abbreviated life of a diminutive giant, said fellow lyricist Alan J. Lerner, who knew Hart in his last few years. For Lerner, Hart was a colossus. Hart and Rodgers met when the composer was 16 and the lyricist 23, and there's no doubt that Hart mentored him until Rodgers found his own superlative voice as a composer, which didn't take long. They shared a determination to break through to a new kind of musical theater song invested with what William Zinsser calls youthful buoyancy and wit. Hart just loved experimenting with triple rhymes, feminine rhymes, internal rhymes, you name it. For example, we'll have Manhattan, the Bronx, and Staten Island too. It's lovely going through the zoo. 1925 for that song. And in the 1930s, along with the Gershwin brothers and Cole Porter, they were at the top of the heap. 2 movie masterpieces and hits with 7 out of the last 8 Broadway shows. But let's come back to trauma for a moment, though Hart never saw a psychiatrist and the term wasn't even used back then. Underneath the surface, Lorenz Hart was a tortured man who stood just under 5 feet with a head that was too large for his body. Once, when someone suggested that he marry, he replied, "Yes, I could get married if I had a stepladder." As we would say today, he was uncomfortable in his own skin. It's known that friends procured men for sex with him, but to describe Hart as homosexual is probably simplistic. Hart wanted love wherever and however he could find it, and ultimately it is that yearning that sets so much of his work apart. Alongside the playful, sardonic songs, and the romantic ones like The Most Beautiful Girl in the World, Where or When, and My Funny Valentine, alongside those are sad, forlorn ballads, like A Ship Without a Sail, which is also the title of the best biography. It Never Entered My Mind, My Friend the Night, Little Girl Blue, Nobody's Heart Belongs to Me, Falling in Love with Love is Falling for Make-Believe, Spring is Here, I Believe in You. The list of the unrequited love songs is very long. As Bobby Short told me, in his songs, Larry Hart wore his heart on his sleeve. No other lyricist of the 1920s and 30s came close to his vulnerability. In Blue Moon, director Richard Linklater brilliantly frames his film with a song from 1926. This funny world makes fun of the things that you strive for. This funny world can laugh at the dreams you're alive for. If you're beaten, conceal it. There's no pity for you. For the world cannot feel it. Just keep to yourself. Weep to yourself. Well, you get the point. Nobody else was writing like that in 1926 for the musical theater. And the other song titles I mentioned, they are still treasured to this day by cabaret artists. But by the time the 1940s came along, Hart's long-term alcoholism and depression had gone out of control, and Rodgers could no longer depend on him. Hart would simply disappear for days at a time. You know, and this is surprising, he was actually offered Oklahoma, but he declined, which was a good thing because what a mismatch of artist and material that would have been. But saying no to Oklahoma put him out of work, which is to say, it left him without a purpose in his life. Can you imagine how devastating that must have been? And that brings us back to some fascinating things about this film. Point. Rodgers and Hart did make the cover of Time magazine in 1938, celebrating the success of their musical The Boys from Syracuse, which in my opinion boasts a perfect score. Point. The credits tell us that the film was inspired, quote unquote, by a young woman, Elizabeth Wieland, with whom Hart had corresponded. In the film, she's played by Margaret Qualley, and it's a big role. I haven't been able to find out what was in the letters, but we do know that Hart proposed marriage twice to his favorite female performer, Vivian Siegel. She said no both times, telling him she didn't love him that way. Point: when we see Rogers, played by Andrew Scott, leave the party with Elizabeth, we get the impression he was a womanizer. He was. Point: throughout his life, Stephen Sondheim criticized Hart's writing as sloppy. I will never forgive him for that. But there's no evidence that Sondheim's mentor, Oscar Hammerstein, brought the 13-year-old to the opening night party for Oklahoma. Point: nor is there proof that Hart knew essayist and novelist E.B. White, played in the film by Patrick Kennedy, though we can imagine how Hart would have greatly admired his writing. We also don't know where the opening night party for Oklahoma was actually held, or whether Hart attended it. Point: after Oklahoma opened, Rogers did offer Hart the chance to write several new songs with him for a new version of their 1927 hit, A Connecticut Yankee, updated to World War II. Hart took on the assignment, writing his final lyrics for the production, which opened 8 months later and included verse that ranks with his very best. But 3 days after the opening, he was found lying in the street, and he died of pneumonia several days later. And there you have it. We'll see how you feel about the film. Director Richard Linklater considered it, quote unquote, a little howl in the night from an artist being left behind. And I might add, an artist who had written more than 1,000 songs with the same composer, Richard Rogers, who called him a kind of genius. Make no mistake, we should idolize Oscar Hammerstein, but let us never forget Lorenz Hart. I'm Bill Rudman from the Musical Theater Project.